Hey everyone, this is Ira Nicodemus, the most interested man, and today we're talking about how you can't have a successful life without having a balanced life. Welcome to the channel, everyone. If it's the first time you're visiting, so glad that you came to check us out. Be sure to look at our website as well, themostinterestedman.com, and follow along for a lot of the different updates in that we're going to be talking about on topics like what we have for you today. So what we're talking about today is how you really need to have balance in your life in order to have success in your life. Now, when we think about our life, we have all these different areas, what we define as the 8 pillars of a man's life. So things like our work, our finances, our family, friends, these different areas that are part of our lives. And oftentimes we define success as how well we're doing in just one of those areas. But what I want to propose to you today is that when we look at our life as a whole, we really can't say that we have a successful life if we're out of balance, if one of these areas is doing really well, but the other area is suffering as a result. So to illustrate why balance is important, I was thinking about a parallel of our physical bodies, of how important balance is in our bodies. So, we're coming off of the end kind of right now of about 3 months of shutdown from the COVID virus, and for several months now, these 3 months, my wife and I haven't been able to go to our normal gym. So normally I'm kind of a heavy weights type guy, like to do a lot of squat, bench press, overhead press, deadlift, and I've built my workouts around kind of these big compound lifts. Well, when we started to go to, the gyms were shut down and we had to figure out more of an at-home workout routine. So my wife found some instructor-led videos, and they were more body weight, a lot of cardio, a lot of core balance type things. And I was skeptical at first. I thought, I like to lift up heavy weights. I want to be big, thick. I really don't want to be like, some sort of yoga person. So what's the benefit of these? What I found out though is pretty quickly is that, balance is important. It's something that I was lacking. So there was moves that were like a Warrior 3 kick out. It's a move where you kind of hinge down on one leg and you go out parallel to the ground. And when I first started to try to do it, I couldn't do it. I had all these little stabilizer muscles that were trying to fire every which way to keep me in balance and keep all the rest of the big heavy muscles I've worked to develop, keep everything in balance. And it was really a tough challenge for me. Now, after a while, after several weeks of this, I started to get better. And what I realized is over the last few months, as my core's gotten stronger, as my balance has gotten better, I've had benefits from that. All of a sudden, a lot of like the back pain, the lower back pain that I've suffered with for a lot of years started to dissipate as a result of having that more balanced, strong physique. So just like our bodies, when we think about our lives as a whole, we want to have balance in order to have an overall health in our lives. So what we've used to illustrate this is this concept of the 8 pillars. And I'm someone who's always liked kind of classical architecture and symmetry. So I get this picture of these 8 pillars that are holding up what they call the pediment, the top of kind of think like a Greek revival type home where it's got that pediment there on the top. So in order to support that structure, we have these 8 pillars. And the 8 pillars represent what I believe are in part of every man's life. Now, depending on who you are and where you're at in life, it's going to be a little bit different. You're going to have different transitions as you go through, but all of us have these 8 pillars represented in some way. So if you think about this picture of kind of this Greek revival structure with these 8 columns or 8 pillars, imagine if a couple of them are lacking. Well, what does that do? If they're not up to where the others are, that puts an undue kind of weight and stress on those taller ones. Ideally, what we want is to have everything in balance, where everything's sharing the load, and we have this really strong structure that's supported in all 8 areas. Now, what's interesting about this is most of the time when we perceive someone as being successful, they oftentimes don't have balance in their life overall. What we see from the outside is someone who may have this extraordinary success. They have this really built up, strong, tall, wide pillar in one area. So maybe it's their finances, their career, or even athleticism or something like that. And we see that, and we don't really know all the other aspects, all those other 7 pillars of their lives. So we just see that one area, and it's like, well, this person is very successful, but oftentimes, unfortunately, they're suffering in those other areas. So when we start to kind of build the model of our life as having the success that we see others have in this one area, it takes away from the fact that we really want to strive to have this balance across all 8 pillars. Now, many of us are familiar with this idea of balance from work-life balance, and this is a good thing. Work-life balance is typically something that is measured by kind of how many hours a week you work, how much vacation you have, the flexibility between your work and the rest of your life. And it fits well within what we're talking about, but we really need to make sure that we consider everything that's involved and we don't just boil it down to work and life. So to illustrate this one, I was thinking about, when I went to college, I went to school for engineering, and I took classes in physics and thermodynamics and fluid mechanics and all these different functions. And one of the things that was really key is when you think about like the first law of thermodynamics, it's a conservation of energy and mass. And in order to study a system, we need to put the boundaries around that system correctly. We need to understand kind of what is going in and what's going out, and we need to make sure we define everything that's within that system. So think about it like a car engine. Let's say you got a race car and it's got a turbocharger on it and it's got a shot of nitrous. Well, if we forget that there's that extra air coming in because of the turbocharger, that extra fuel that comes from a nitrous injection, we're trying to understand the power input, the power output. If we don't look at all of the components of that system, then we're not going to fully understand how that car is performing and be able to tune it appropriately. So in the same way, when we think about our lives, we can't just boil it down to a real simplistic kind of work and life. We want to look at it holistically and make sure we define everything that's involved in our life. And that's what we're trying to do when we talk about these 8 pillars. Now, the impact of an unbalanced life, it's not pretty. And unfortunately, it's very common that I see throughout men throughout this country. And especially I see this among kind of middle-aged men, because when you think about what happens when you start to get out of balance, let's take someone who's really struggling in their work life. So work isn't where they want to be, and all of a sudden, they're stressed about that, and they start to put a lot of hours into work. The stress is maybe causing them to have some other unhealthy habits. They start to drop off exercise or eating too much. They're not coming home and spending time with their family. It kind of spirals back around. Now they're not sleeping that well, which is just making things worse. And over time, everything starts to crumble because there's this one area that's really out of balance and they're not sure how to handle that. The end result is that there's a lot of guys who are walking around with a midlife crisis and a beer gut because they've kind of let everything get out of control, and just the impact of this unbalanced life, like I said, it's not pretty. So how do you have more success and balance in your life? Well, in order to achieve this balanced life, it may require what appears to be a step backward. So let's say that we're looking at someone who's really has a successful work life. They're very successful in that area. They've got good finances because of it. But it's kind of this big overgrown pillar and the other areas are a little bit weak. Well, it might require that in order to focus more on service and friends and family and the community that you're in, that you need to take a step back from that work success. Doesn't mean you need to tear it all down, but maybe if a promotion's coming up, you say, hey, no, I'm going to stay where I'm at so you can devote more time to focus to these other areas. It may require that you actually change jobs or make more of a shift, but what's going to happen is, even though that seems like a setback, if you're reallocating that time, that effort to grow in those other areas, over time as you become more balanced across your entire life, you really are more successful. So moving into this area, it does require some sacrifice, but as long as you're reallocating your time and your resources appropriately, then overall the end result is going to be worth it. Now, if you're like me, you probably dream of having it all, that you want to have not only balance across all these areas, but you want to have this high level of success as well. You don't want just all those pillars to be in balance, but you want to have this very tall, kind of strong building. And the question becomes, is it possible? We all want to have a six-pack and a great job and a loving family and good finances and friends and just everything's in balance and we're really successful. But is that possible? Well, I think that it is. And the reason is when you start to bring these areas into balance, there's kind of this synergy that's created. When you're healthy in your body and you're eating well, you're sleeping well, you've got a loving, supported family, all of a sudden that's going to help you in your work life. You're going to have more energy going into it. You're going to have better boundaries within your work so you're able to work better as a team. You're able to delegate things better as a manager. You're able to put those boundaries around your time, and it starts to breed into this overall kind of cycle of success. So I believe firmly that you can have success in all areas, but it begins by having that balance. What we've done here at The Most Interested Man is create an assessment where we look across the 8 pillars that we've defined, the 8 pillars of a man's life, and we have 4 questions for each of these. So you go through and take this assessment. It's available on our webpage. I'll put a link in the description below. You complete this assessment, and what it's going to do is give you a score about how you're doing in all these different pillars. What you're then going to do is download our free PDF guide, and it will help to kind of walk you through what do you do to start improving in those areas that are lacking the most. And as you bring one up into balance and you start to work on all of them, eventually you have much more balance and you can really start focusing on improving all of them. So if you haven't already, be sure to check out the website, download the guide, take the assessment, and I think it's really going to help you as you start to work through this area of how to have a balanced and successful life. Thanks so much for watching the video today. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for additional content. Share it with some others. We're still growing this community, so we really appreciate if you were to share this with a couple other guys who you think might benefit from it. Thanks again. We'll talk to you next time, and until then, stay interested.